Hello, my name is Mike McCowan, and I will be presenting my pre-prepared talk track around the Desktop 2 subject on page 56 called Calculations and Aggregations in Overall Profitability. This is for your consideration and review, and I appreciate any and all feedback. Whew. So now that we've discovered different ways that we can get different data sets, perhaps on different levels of granularity, talking to each other correctly and ready for visualization within Tableau, the idea behind a data blend, we're ready to kind of switch gears here. We're going to be taking a dive into the realm of calculations within Tableau. So who remembers back from Desktop 1, what kind of calculations did we perform? Yeah, it was table calculations. And as an add-on to that question, who could tell me where does Tableau process these calculations? Correct, they're processed locally, so they don't query the database at all. It's just in the temporary table within Tableau, and it performs its calculations locally right there. That's going to be the main difference right out of the box for calculations versus table calculations. Calculations, calculated fields, actually get sent back to your database. The query is done there, and then the results are sent back for Tableau to visualize in a visualization. So what I've done for you here real quick, because these calculated fields, they can feel a little bit confusing or daunting or whatever word you want to put to it, but once you have an instinctual level for what Tableau is doing in the background, they become very, very useful, and they become a little bit easier to use. So what I've done is I've prepared a short concept back here that I'll draw on the board, and then I'll turn around and we can kind of discuss it as a group. So just give me one quick minute here, and I'll be back with you in just a second. So when I was a kid, we liked to have a lot of garage sales, and we had a little bit of a different take on a garage sale because my mom was a woodworker, a carpenter, so she would go to some resale shops and buy damaged goods, try and fix them up, and then sell them in the garage sale later on. So what makes that a little bit different is typically in a garage sale you're going to be receiving a lot of losses. You're buying it at wholesale and selling it for a discount at the garage sale, but ours are a little bit different in that we actually turned a profit in quite a few of the garage sales. It was almost a mini family, I won't call it a business, we'll just call it a tradition for now. But us being the kids, my mom always liked to attach a lesson. Whatever she was teaching us about, in this case money, she would have us build a small spreadsheet and do our little analyses. She would obviously provide her direction. So in this particular case, she wanted to know which of the items were turning the most profit on a line-by-line basis. So basically she wanted to know if we sold 10 of one thing, were all 10 of them profitable, or did we take a loss on some of them? So a row-by-row transactional calculation, if you will. The second thing she wanted to do, us to do, was to determine whether or not the overall garage sale as a whole was profitable. A very key indicator of success, I suppose you could say. And we had several of these garage sales every month, and so after a while you could get a sense or a trend. You almost saw some seasonality for the garage sale season or something like that. So up here on the board, I have a very small data set, if you will, of a made-up garage sale. And we have items overall on the left-hand side, then the wholesale price, and then the price that we sold it for at a garage sale. So for one of the calculations, probably the most important, the one that's done in pretty much every business, is am I turning a profit overall? So what this is going to do is it's going to sum up all of our transactions And then it's going to return how much we spent and how much we made on each of those transactions after it sums them all up. So what this is doing, summing up all my transactions, and then it's giving me a total in return. So I'm aggregating my entire data set, and then I'm getting a total at the end. And then I could take my wholesale divided by my garage sale price and get my profit margin, if you will. Put that into a cell, and then you could analyze that later if you wanted to. The second would be taking it at a transactional level, so we're going across the table and determining if each sale turned a profit or not. So over here you can see we made a little bit of profit. We like to have some popcorn at our garage sales just to get people in off the streets. You know, they smell the popcorn. We always had some form of arts or craft that we as the kids do. I think one time we had some pet rocks or something, which we obviously didn't even spend $1 on. And some poor unsuspecting soul shelled out $5 to us for it, making us the happiest kids in the world. But then, you obviously have items that are going to depreciate as well. Your CDs and your video games, those are items that you're more likely to take a loss over. So this, although it is a very simple visualization of what we did, it is an accurate depiction of what Tableau does when it has an aggregated calculation or a non-aggregated calculation. And once you get into more complex calculations, you'll start to see that you can get some potentially incorrect data depending on how you structure your calculations. So understanding how Tableau treats it in the background is tantamount to using them correctly. So how can we take this small example and extrapolate it into a larger business opportunity? And to be honest, it's really not that hard. Let's say, for example, you are a small business owner. You just bought 4 stores in 4 different cities, selling a litany of different items. As it is with most new businesses, it can be really hard to turn a profit in your first couple of years. And as the store owner, you want to do a little bit of analysis on this to figure out what you can do to maybe turn a profit quicker or to understand how things are going well or poorly. So the first baseline calculation that you want to do, just like in our garage sale example back here, we want to get a total profit ratio. We want to get the profit margin. We want to know if that store is profitable. So that's going to be aggregating all of our rows right here and then getting a total for our profit right there. The next thing that we want to do is we want to determine if each of the items that we are selling is turning a profit as well. And intuitively right off the bat you might think, hey, if I bought a pencil for $1 and I sold that pencil for $2, I should have a profit of $1 on 100% of my pencil transactions. But we know from the business world that this is not always the case. For example, if you have something that is just not selling, you might have to run a sale on it. If you have items that depreciate over time, you might have to sell it for less than what you initially bought it for. And understanding this as a shop owner can really help you do a lot more analysis. So for the shop owner, he might want to do some more demographics information for some targeted marketing in areas that aren't performing as well. Or he might want to copy some stores that are performing well and copy those practices into some of the businesses that are not. So that's for the store owner. Us as analysts, we are here to provide those insights in a visual manner so you can tell at a glance which stores are doing well and focus more of your mind power and focus more of your attention on getting those unprofitable stores more profitable. So that, in essence, is what Tableau is doing in the background. We're going to go ahead and jump into Tableau here real quick, and we're going to see how we can build this in just a couple of clicks. So while my screen warms up here, let me go ahead and pivot my camera. So while my screen warms up here, who out there can tell me what Tableau's favorite aggregation is? By default, whenever you grab a field and put it on your canvas, what's the aggregation that's going to apply by default? Yeah, it's sum. And go ahead and just keep that in your back pocket for now, because we're gonna kind of use that to clue us in on how Tableau is going to treat these calculations before we even really test them out. So what I'm going to do up here first is I'm going to build a very basic visualization. We're going to be looking at the sales in each category. Excuse me, let me go ahead and make those bars horizontal. And we want to analyze that across several different regions. So here we have a very basic visualization that we can use for some small analysis, but we want to go a little bit further into this and again provide those same two analyses that we saw up here in my garage sale example from when I was a kid. So we're going to go ahead and make a calculated field. We can do this a couple of different ways. We want to click this downward caret up here next to my dimensions. Or you can always right-click whatever field you want to create the calculated field, and there will be an option for it. The only difference is in the right-click method, it's going to auto-load whatever field you clicked on into your calculation. So my preferred method is going to be the downward caret, so that's what I will continue to use. And I'm going to go ahead and create a calculated field. So again, the two insights that we want are whether or not we're profitable overall and whether or not a specific transaction was profitable across many sales. So for the first calculation, I'm going to name it appropriately because this will give us a new field over in the left-hand side, and I'm going to name it profitability overall. So do you think an overall profitability, I want to know if my overall store is profitable. Do you think this is going to be an aggregated calculation or a row-by-row transactional? Exactly, yeah, perfect. It's going to be an aggregated calculation. And we're going to tell Tableau that by simply putting in the aggregation into the calculation. So let's go ahead. There's many different aggregations you can choose. In our case right now, we're just going to use sum. And we're going to go with sum of profit is greater than 0. So this is going to look through the entire table, aggregate my results, and then determine whether or not that profit is above 0. What do you think is going to happen when I take this field and drag it onto, let's say, color? It's going to change the color of the bar to whether or not there was profit or not in that section, region, category, whatever you're slicing your axes by. So let's go ahead and select OK. And this should give us a new field over in the left-hand side, and there we can see that we have it. But right off the bat, what do you guys notice about this measure? What's a little bit different about it? Yeah, it's blue. It's blue. It's in my measure section, but it's blue. Now we remember from the diagram from earlier that there are 4 sections that we can put things in. And then we have our attributes, which we'll touch later. But we have discrete dimension and continuous measures, which we have been dealing with thus far this class. And this is our first instance we see of a discrete measure. What does that mean? Well, let's go ahead and take a look. So it's telling me that there's an aggregation in there. It's in my measures section, but it's still just bucketing things into true or false. And we know if we're grouping or bucketing things, well, that's a discrete. So we have our first discrete measure. Let's go ahead and drag it onto color. And as we predicted, it colored our bar based on whether or not we had profit or not in that segment. So right away, once we look at this chart, we might have assumed that, say, furniture in the east was doing great, but with this simple calculation added, we know that while our sales are high, we are not turning a profit. And again, we might want to take a deeper dive into that to figure out what's going wrong there. Perhaps it's a loss leader for the store, so something that they intentionally price below wholesale to get people to come in and buy more stuff. Again, that's not our job as the analyst, that's for the business owner to decide, but we have provided this insight in a perfectly easy, in an easily digestible format, excuse me. So I'm going to go ahead and name my sheets. I cannot tell you how many times I've had to revisit a workbook and completely forgot what everything was because I didn't name my sheets properly. So let's name this profitability overall. I'm going to take this sheet and I'm going to duplicate it. And now we're going to change our calculation ever so slightly so that we can see the percent of transactions that were profitable. So this is the calculation that's going row by row through the database, and it doesn't care if I'm profitable overall, it just cares if that single transaction was profitable. So we're going to go to my downward caret and we're going to change, or we're going to create a calculated field. I'm going to name this one as well, profitability by transaction. And now we're going to make this calculation, but since it's row by row, we're going to tell Tableau that by simply omitting the aggregation that we had on the last one, and if you'll remember, it was sum. So I'm just going to put profit is greater than 0. And here again, you can see that I have on the left-hand side another new field under my dimensions this time, because it is bucketing things into true-false, which makes it discrete, but there's no aggregation contained, so it makes it a discrete dimension, which right now we're much more comfortable to see. Over here in my color, since I duplicated my sheet, I still have my previous calculation, and you can see that it even put an AGG in there, which will denote that it is an aggregated calculation. We're going to replace that field with my new calculation called profitability by transaction. And we can see what happens in my view. So now my bar is colored, now my bar is segmented by the colors based on which of those transactions within that segment were profitable or not. So for example, my technology in the central region is a little bit skewed towards the unprofitable side. So there's a lot of insights that we could potentially draw from that as business owners, and a lot of potential fixes as well. If you put those side by side in the dashboard, you can draw even further insight, all from one spot. Does anybody have any questions between the difference, row by row calculations or aggregated calculations? All right, perfect. That's what I like to see. If everyone could please turn to page 56 in your books, you'll have an opportunity for some hands-on experience, and I'll be walking around the room a little bit just to make sure everybody's on the right track. Feel free to flag me down if you guys are getting stumped on anything.